So my name is Devin Cairns, and I am a current member of AGU H3S, along with my co-organizer for today's panel, Liz Andrews. And H3S stands for the Hydrology Student Section Subcommittee of the American Geophysical Union. And the goal of this group is to provide skills and information sharing, as well as a supportive network for students and early career scientists who work in the hydrology realm. And just again, as a brief overview of the webinar layout, we will have some set discussion questions with our panelists, and that'll last about until the last 15 minutes, which will be reserved for audience questions. And just to repeat it, we really encourage everyone to ask their questions via the Q&A function next to the chat at any time through the seminar, and we'll read these questions during the audience Q&A portion. And again, there's a vote function, so if there's a question you really like, you can upvote that question to get it to the top of the queue and make sure that we ask it. Okay, now that we have all these logistics taken care of, I'm excited to welcome our panelists and to kick off this webinar where we're going to be focusing on mentorship. I think we all know that mentorship is important in many aspects of our career and life. Our mentors can give us advice, they'll cheer us on, they'll advocate for us. They can expand our networks and also open doors to new opportunities for us. However, it can be really difficult to understand where to find mentors sometimes, and also what role you should be looking for these people to fill as mentors within your career and life, and how that these roles and mentorship relationships may need to change over your career and lifetime as well. And so to really help us dive into this topic, we're excited to be joined by our three great panelists, each representing a different career stage, who have agreed to take time out of their day. Thank you very much to talk about this topic of mentorship and give us, share some experience and give us some advice. And so I think the first order of business is if everybody can introduce themselves, but I'll add a bit of a spin to it too, where during your introduction, if you can talk about not just who you are, where you're from, could you also speak to your mentorship philosophy as both a mentor and a mentee? And I think the best way is if we just go in order from left to right as the flyer here that we're showing. So Erica first.
Hello, thank you all so much for being here. It's great to be here. My name is Erica McCormick. I did my undergrad at University of Texas at Austin, and now I'm a PhD student at Stanford. I work on eco-hydrology in Alexander Konings's lab, and I think I'm the graduate student representative, so I'll mostly be speaking to being a mentee, but I've got one undergrad mentee right now of my own, and have been lucky to have other people both in collaborative and different mentorship roles. I guess when I was thinking of my main piece of advice and my main philosophy as a mentee, I think it's really to resist the urge to say no. I think there's so many times when you're either mentoring or being mentored that you think you know what you want to do next, or you think you know what you don't want to do next. And I found that the main thing that's benefited me both in finding mentors and in maintaining those relationships is to try to hold back on that instinct and listen first, and maybe even try things first, and then come back to the table with maybe a no or a no and.
That's great. I love that. Always being open to new opportunities. So next is Chris.
Good afternoon, everyone, or morning, or, anyways. Yeah, my name is Christopher Box. I'm actually, a recent faculty at Penn State. So, give a shout out, some love to you all there. I do miss Penn State in State College. I'm an associate professor at Howard University. I started in January 2023 after leaving Penn State. My initial tenure position was in CUNY, so I've been around the block a bit. A bit about me: I'm an atmospheric chemist / physicist. Really, I'm a physical chemist. I study the stability of solar and exoplanetary atmospheres, but for the rest of my life, which is about 30 more years or so, I will look at planetary health impacts. So I'm looking at logistical models, to look at how we interact with our built environment and to quantify that and create these nice coefficients to look at correlations or degree of correlations. Now, in terms of mentorship, that's just who I am. I'm originally from Jamaica, grew up on the East Coast. A lot of people mentored me and taught me how to be a great mentor. I learned that from my family. We're all business owners. But the essence of mentorship in terms of the philosophical framework is empathy. Okay. How do you impart empathy and resonate empathy with your constituents? And so that's the main thing. You have to meet people where they are, right? You can't meet them where you think they should be or where you think they may be, but you have to meet them where they are. And that starts off just like any organism or entity by just talking to people to meet them where they are. And then the next thing, I always have conversations about finances, and that really constrains the argument. So I get that started very quickly. So empathy actually, you know, anchored by social adeptness, and then conversations around economic mobility, and then we take it from there. And the last thing I'll say about mentorship is normalize to all of these confounding factors. You know, once you know thyself, you can know who you can connect with. And for the mentee, you should know thyself as well. And not every mentee and mentor are going to resonate. So keep that in mind and just keep it moving and keep things positive. Just like Ms. Erica said, I always try to keep things extremely positive. And last thing I'll say is, in regards to that, when you're mentoring people, even if you give all to yourself, not every time someone's going to reciprocate it. And just that's how life is. But you got to keep it positive.
Thank you. I kind of like how things are being echoed already, like listening and empathy go hand in hand. So last is Paige.
All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Paige Becker. I am a fresh postdoc at Colorado School of Mines in the Civil and Environmental Engineering program, working with Cairo to understand watershed disturbance and using the National Water Model. But prior to that, I had just in August finished up my PhD at Oregon State University on hyperexam stuff. So I think my perspective here is kind of fun because I am switching from primarily mentee to now mentor. Also being chair-elect for AGU H3S. So I'll be chair next year. And so that's also going to be moving into this more mentorship role, which is a really fun transition for me to make. And I think one of the biggest things that I have gotten out of the past 5 years in terms of effective mentor-menteeships and some of my advice is just learning to advocate for yourself. People aren't necessarily going to know what you need. Your advisor's not necessarily going to know what you need unless you tell them. And so I think that's been a super valuable skill for me is, you know, learning to advocate and say, this is what I need to be successful. And here's what I need from you to help me achieve those goals. And I think that's really helped in terms of me being successful and having strong mentorship relationships. So yeah, that's my perspective on that.
Thank you so much, all, for your great introductions and philosophical takes. I think this next question kind of touches on some of the same topics as your philosophical approach to mentor-mentee relationships, but I'd like you all to think about your most effective mentor or mentee relationship in your life at the moment. And if you can define and maybe relate back to this philosophical idea of the characteristics, the specific characteristics that made this relationship so successful. We could probably just rotate back through the opposite direction, if that works.
Yeah, I think for me, this echoes a lot of what Paige was saying, that the honesty in being honest about your values, kind of like what other people have echoed, that I got the advice once that it's somewhat easy to change people's minds or to have a conversation where someone changes their perspective on maybe something that needs to be done, but it's very difficult for two people to fundamentally change their values to match. And so I think knowing that at the first, you know, before you decide to even be part of a mentor-mentee relationship is really important, but that requires a lot of honesty, both to know what that is about yourself and for the mentor or mentee, the other person, to know that, but then also bravery to broadcast that and really say it explicitly. So I think the honesty is important, not just for picking this relationship to be in, but then also to continue to tell the other person what exactly you need, and then to ask and hopefully get that reciprocated for what they need, whether they're the mentor or the mentee. I think it's very easy from the mentee's perspective to feel sort of afraid to ask for things and afraid of what your mentor might think of you. But that's kind of like the first failure point, at least in my experience. And so the more I've like leaned into just being honest about, my flaws as a mentor and as a mentee, the better it's been. And those relationships have just gotten more successful over time as I continue to learn that skill.
Yeah, I think my most crucial mentee mentorship experience was started in 1997, actually. Just to contextualize that, I received my PhD in 2005. So in 1997, my second father, non-biological, but in case, yeah, I called him my second father because he really treated me like I was his son. He graduated in 1952 from Morehouse as a physical chemist, mathematical physicist, and he was the first Black graduate student at Caltech, actually in 1952. Not the James King Jr. And fast forward, he was the second, I think, or so to be hired at NASA, first Black person to be hired at JPL. And fortunately, he came back after 35 years to work at Morehouse as a distinguished planetary scientist. So he and I met. He said he had $250,000 to do research. I was the only one that raised my hand in the class. And that's how we actually got to know each other. I heard about him. I was like, I want to be just like you. I didn't even know who he was because I know about Caltech and I know he was so smart and he had all these accolades. And when I raised my hand and I met with him, he changed my life. He gave me a project, funded me, my first major research project as a NASA McNair scholar, looking at the formation of life-forming molecules and interstellar dust clearings. He left me alone in the lab, made me fix vacuums and get my hands dirty and clean and dirty again and break things. And then he changed my life, literally. I would not be talking to you all today, I am confident, if he didn't send me to California as a grad student. And I was the 8th Black grad student to enter Caltech in 1999, the only one that year, and actually recruited the rest. Anyways, but my whole point is that relationship ties into empathy because he had his own experience, and he and I met in the convergence point, what I'm trying to work on, actually literally as part of my research to promote, and he made me feel like a scientist, right? And I actually felt like I had an identity as a scientist. One of the first times in my life, someone said, I want to send you to one of the best schools in the world. And I'm like, why? What do you see in Box that is so special? He was like, you'll see. And I went there and the rest is history. So that empathy and that mutual understanding, because we always talked about money. I care about money, that's first and foremost. I love people, I love my wife, my parents, but I love money. And we talked heavily about that. And he made me, and I'll just end here, he just made me feel like a true scientist. He made me feel belonging in the realm of academia, even though academia has its issues, right? This is 20 years ago, okay, 25 years ago. And the rest is history. So sense of belonging was key for me, and establishing this mutual level of respect in terms of intellect was also very key. All right, so I had to do my thing when I went to Caltech, and so.
Yeah, I think, Chris, your point about finding someone you want to be like or aspire to, I think has been really valuable for me in finding mentors. And, not just finding someone I necessarily want to be like, but also just someone that I feel like I can trust and get along with. I'm not saying that you have to be best friends, but just, having that mutual level of understanding like Chris was emphasizing. But, finding those folks that you say, wow, I really want to be like them, and also making sure that they kind of reciprocate that and say, I believe in you and can help you get to that point, I think is super valuable. And so that was something for me that was really important. But also, I think looking back to, the start of my PhD versus towards the end, I think a lot of times I also leaned on my peer mentors in many ways, especially other students that were in my research group, ones that had been there for a little bit longer, and saying like, okay, what have, leaning on them to understand what have they learned both from our advisor and just also their experiences. Passing on that kind of generational knowledge is super invaluable, and hearing about their experiences, especially with their advisor, I think was able to help me understand how I can get the best relationship with my advisor as a mentor too. So I think that was super valuable to kind of lean on my peer mentors at the time, to help guide me. But yeah, like biggest thing for me, I think, was just finding those people as like, I want to be like them, not necessarily personality wise, but like, I love the research that they're doing or the successes that they've had. And I want to follow in kind of that path. And that's been super valuable for me.
Thank you so much. I think that reflects a lot on like knowing yourself and getting to know what you need, what you value. Then you can look for those in other people to develop those mentor relationships. I think you kind of spoke to this in terms of peer-to-peer mentoring, Paige, but I think my next question is for Paige and Erica, especially as early career, as you're moving into these more mentorship roles. How have you seen your mentorship responsibilities grow? And what strategies and tips do you have for other early career people who are in the same mentorship growing stage as they prepare to expand their mentoring and mentorship capacities?
Yeah, I can take the lead on it this time, Erica. So I think for me, I've seen it grow in some ways. My first summer that I started as a PhD student, I was given 3 undergrads to help mentor and teach them everything they to know about hydrology in a short summer kind of thing. And so that was just really fun to watch them grow. And I think part of what made that successful is just I took time to understand, what do you know already? What do you still need to learn? What can I help with? What excites you about this? And so then I could just kind of hand off like, oh, this is really exciting to you, go run with it kind of thing. And, I try and do that with H3S as new members come in too, but I also try and think about the mentors that I've had and the ways that they've helped me. And so I try and reciprocate that, but more in the way of passing it down to other people. So, when I was taking my qualifying exams, I had friends read my proposal and stuff. And so then I try and return that favor for others that are kind of going through that same phase. And so I think a lot of it is just, for me, is thinking back about like what helped me. And a lot of that was previous mentorships that I've had or continue to have, and finding ways to, like I said, kind of return that favor on for future generations. And so I think that's the biggest thing for me that's changed, is basically taking, okay, this is what mentors have done for me, and time for me to now kind of pass that on.
Yeah, that's sort of similar for me. So this is my second year as a PhD student. And then before I came to Stanford, I worked at the University of Texas at Austin for, I guess, almost 2 years during the pandemic, just as a researcher. So I was interacting with lots of peers and people that were still undergraduates and people that were graduate students. But the biggest shift has been recently. I'm working with my first undergraduate student here at Stanford. And I was pretty afraid at first. It's one thing, I feel like, or for me, it was one thing to be in maybe a field environment or kind of a group environment where people might be asking for help, or doing this sort of more peer-to-peer type of mentorship. But it felt completely different to me to be told, like, here's this person who has not done research before, who's excited about it. They're learning about hydrology for the first time. She's kind of just starting her learning curve with coding as well, but is very excited. That felt much more high pressure to me, especially because I remember when I was, a sophomore in undergrad, I loved research, and a lot of people, didn't. And I think a lot of that's just the randomness of what kind of environment you end up with. you know, and maybe the willingness to try out more environments, you know, if you don't like the first research experience you land in. But that all being said, I found it's been very rewarding, as Paige said, much more rewarding than I even anticipated. And I've kind of found that in addition to the honesty I mentioned before about, you know, just being honest when I don't know what to do, or being really direct and asking her what she needs, the main things that I've found to be helpful have been kind of little, very tangible pieces of advice that I've gotten. So I've been fortunate enough to get to talk to my advisor a lot about this mentorship role that I'm in, which has been very helpful. And one piece of advice that she gave me that I really liked was just to be intentional about the words that I use when I talk to my mentee. And so one tip she gave was that instead of asking, you know, do you have any questions, asking what questions do you have? So just setting this person up to feel welcome to ask questions. Another thing that my advisor does that I don't know if she's noticed that I've noticed, but I've noticed that she always starts her meetings by saying, what do you want to talk about today? Which I find really, really great. It's so different to hear that than sort of a blank setup or this, you know, this impression that, okay, it's time to show results. She sets up every meeting saying, what do you want to talk about today? And I think that's really great. One final piece, I heard this in another panel. I recommend going to as many of these professional development panels as you can. I find them to be so useful as an attendee, and I'm finding this one to be useful already as well. But I heard about the 4 Ps in mentorship. And so it's polite, professional, positive, and proactive. And I feel like that really just encapsulates a lot about the mentorship mentee experience. And so I've been trying to embody that, kind of as Paige said, both to be a good mentor, but also just to show that that's a way that you can be and pass that along, so that hopefully my mentee can embody that in her future mentorship relationships as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I love all these insights. I think what really struck me was talking a lot about using what you've learned and what's benefited you, and reaching back and pulling people up. You know, all rising ship rises all, or lifts up all boats, or rising tide lifts up all boats. I think that's the saying. But so it's really nice to see that we're really thinking about these things and trying to develop these skills. And so to shift my question to Chris is, how have you seen your mentorship shift throughout your career in terms of, you know, going for PhD, postdoc, different professorship positions, and further, as we early career folks move along this same trajectory, how should we expect our mentors to change too? So it's kind of a 2-part question.
You know, as you all were talking, I always wonder about, so, you know, when you start your life, whether you like it or not, you're a mentor. Inherently, you're a mentor. Someone is going to be looking up to you and looking at you, not everyone, obviously, but looking up to you for positive metrics that you exude, right? And staying away from you from the negative ones, right? And then you're also a mentee as well. Inherently, I'm still a mentee, right? I have people, for example, my collaborators who have more expertise than I am. So I'm learning from them in various ways, and also the students. Even though people win Nobel Prizes, we know that no one really wins them by themselves, right? No one accomplishes great feats by themselves. So holistically, inherently, we're all mentors and mentees from birth. But how that changes, how that temporally changes as time passes, depends on who you are. Not everyone wants to be a mentor. We know this. Right? Not like, just like not everyone wants to be your friend or be around you, even if you said nothing to this person. So so this thing about mentorship is inherent, and it culminates to me towards one thing: respect. Right? People can talk about mentorship in this way and decouple it, but it's all about respect. How do you, you know, when you know yourself, meaning I love interacting with people. So you know, I've mentored hundreds of students and other professionals, right? So in that context, you have to realize that it all comes down to respect. No matter if you're in the informal setting or the formal setting, if you respect someone, you will take the time and you actually want to interact and engage with students and help students to provide economic mobility, because that's what it's all about, right? You will take that time to impart your empathy, to have those discussions. People make mistakes. It's not the end of the world, right? And make them feel like they actually belong, which increases their identity in the academic setting. Plain and simple. I'll give you one example of what I actually mean, okay? Recently, I won't say anything, I'll keep it very anonymous. I was asked as a part of a grant to mentor someone, okay, from another university. It happened to be, not Howard. This particular university is not in it's an R1, very ambitious. And the student is 4 years, in her 4th year. The student in her 4th year hasn't taken her quals, wants mentorship. I was very confused. I know the advisor, very hands-off advisor. Okay, I'm very hands-on. Long story short, I said, I will support your cause so you can take your exam, so you can graduate, because the advisor wants you to graduate. Long story short, I get a call from people at Howard saying I'm too aggressive, okay? I'm too much. The student said I'm too much. I was very rude, actually, in trying to help this student, all right? So I squared it out. It's very simple. I told the advisors, anyways, just like that, even though I wanted to help someone, that person we didn't meet. It just didn't work. But her advisor is not even helping her as well, okay? So my whole point is that even for that student, even for yourself as a student coming up, you have to recognize who you are too. You may not even want to be in grad school, right? I don't know. You may not even want to do it. My whole point, I'll just reiterate, it's not, to me, that complicated. I hate to say it like that. It's all about how you respect yourself, how you like to be respected. And at the end of the day, Erica, everyone on here wants to make more money. They want to feel like they are important, that they belong in the setting they're in. No one wants to feel like they don't belong. And once you feel like you actually belong, after going through these iterations, right? Because I go through those iterations with students. The majority of students I interact with, but not everyone's going to appreciate the love you have to offer. So you have to recognize that, and you have to be honest, okay? Even when you have imposter syndrome, which I still have a tad bit of, right? But Dr. King was able to alleviate that. You have to be honest and not make it more complicated. Mentorship in academia is no different than you trusting one of your best friends. It's that simple. You care about someone, you make it happen. If you want to recruit, I'll speak superset wise. Okay, if you're thinking about bringing people to your domain, you're going to make sure they're well-resourced, right? Both ways, and so you both can accomplish similar goals. Lastly, not to beat it to literally to death, but it's really about respect. And people are humans and can be easily, subtly feel disrespected and excluded. So empathy, iterating to a sense of belonging, increases your identity in your environment, and knowing thyself. So.
Thank you. I really love all this reiteration of respect, knowing yourself, because I think that's a lot where we do have imposter syndrome and struggle with it. And it's a lot of, knowing yourself, knowing you're good, knowing you're enough about these things. And I think having good mentors that can emphasize this respect and listening, and they know themselves well as well, can really lift you up. I think we have about a little bit of time for about one more question. And this one's a little bit more specific. I think a lot of times, especially as a scientist, you have to give and receive feedback a lot. And I think our mentor-mentee relationships rely a lot on that respect during giving and receiving feedback and listening. And so do you have strategies that you use as a mentor and a mentee to prepare for giving and receiving feedback and fostering communication? And how do you think this helps develop an effective relationship? So we can start, with Chris.
You can
Oh,
go first.
ladies first. I was just gonna say ladies first. That's all.
Yeah, I can start. I think one of the things that is really valuable for me, at least with my both my postdoc advisor and my past PhD advisor, is at least for them, they have always asked at the end of the meeting, like, you know, what do you need from me? And that's just been really valuable to know, A, that they value me, but also it's just kind of, it essentially opens a door for me to say like, hey, this is, you know, I could use help with this. And so it really helps alleviate some of that, you know, either imposter syndrome or just like me feeling like I'm not good enough when they essentially just are upfront about like, what do you need from me specifically? What can I help you with? So that's been really valuable for me in terms of just feeling comfortable. And so again, that's, you know, that's something I try and again, reciprocate of like, you know, what do you need from me? What can I do to help support you, help make, you know, you successful? And so I think asking like that, I think has been really valuable for me, both in terms of mentoring and being a mentee.
Yeah, I think my sentiments would echo Paige's for sure. I think again, for me, it's the small things sometimes can matter a lot. So I think it's great. Like my advisor now, you know, she usually or always so far has said, you know, good job at the end of a meeting. And I think that goes a long way. Just those like little things that can help the imposter syndrome and can ultimately encourage all of us to be more honest and open with both our needs and our, you know, complaints and our criticisms. I mean, I'm definitely still afraid when I, you know, when I give my advisor my work and I hope that it's good enough. And I just have to think to myself, like, I want these edits. Like I want as many criticisms as I can possibly get because I'm a student and that's the point. And just to remember that this is all ultimately in service of learning and growth. But then also I think maybe somebody said before about the mentor and the mentee both actually wanting to be there. I think all of this is predicated on that ideally you both want to grow in your roles as mentor and mentee and grow as scientists. And so some of the memories that I look back on that really help me when I'm feeling afraid of giving feedback or getting feedback are the memories of when I have had conflicts and the real commitment of my mentors at that time to grow and to become a better mentor made that conflict be ultimately resolved in a bettering of our relationship and becoming a better mentor and mentee, and just a bit closer overall. And so I think if you can find that, which obviously I think I'm definitely reflecting on my better mentorship experiences here. If you can find a mentorship experience on either side that does have these qualities of being honest and of both people being committed to being better mentors and mentees, you know, and of being having a lot of respect, you know, then you can rely on that. Like you can feel confident in that. I think if you can't, then there's a lot to be said for getting a different mentor or not being a mentor in this situation. And so being upfront about that as quickly as possible, and taking steps to avoid being in a situation where the mentorship relationship isn't going to work out. For example, by being, you know, really clear about, as you said before, the finances, but also just the logistics, the expectations, and the values that you both have, and like you said before, the ways that you want to be respected. Being as clear about that as early as you can, and then being willing to move situations if you need to, I think is what makes all this other stuff possible. It makes it possible to rely on your sense of who you are and the confidence that you can give and receive feedback with respect.
Yeah, I think Ms. Page and Erica really hit it on the money there. So I'll just I'll be pretty concise, synoptic with my expression here. It's really about transparency, especially in the beginning. Okay, and transparency. And one thing I just plug is that transparency, especially on the social dynamics of how you operate, that should be very transparent. Not everyone everyone operates differently, right? You know what I'm saying? No one wants, some people don't like emails. I remember one student was like, don't email me at the end of the week. I'm like, oh, on the weekends. I'm like, okay. obviously didn't work out, right? But I'm just saying, the audacity, anyways. So, and then how you feel disrespected, I always try to convey that right up front to people. Like everyone has their little things, right? For example, if I send an invite, I appreciate when people accept it. So, I don't show up to meetings when people don't accept my invite. So that's like little things you straighten out. Yeah, and just transparency, especially about the money, how they're going to be funded, when they're going to finish, map that out very quickly, and everything up front. And one of the things I actually do, I started to do, because I learned I have to do it, is I give them a kind of technical, problem to solve initially when I first meet the student. And that's something I've actually started to practice, especially for hiring people. You do that, of course, but especially mentors, I have to do that. And that's a good way to filter people. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much. And respect for time for the audience, we're going to move into the audience Q&A for the last 15 minutes, and Liz will be moderating that section. Okay, thank you so much. It's been so great so far. I'm excited to hear the answers to the next questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for your feedback so far. We have some questions in the chat, and we have one that's been upvoted. So I believe this would be best answered by Chris, but anybody that has feedback is welcomed. So have you ever had a situation where you had to cut off a mentee? If so, how did you know that you needed to let the mentee go?
Oh yeah, several. This is going to happen. This is how it works. You be prepared. You're going to do it. And don't feel any qualms about cutting people off. Number one, my advice on that, do not feel like you have to be a martyr for anyone. That's my advice for up and coming mentees, mentors. You got to protect yourself. So the thing about respect is when I feel like people are trying to finesse me, lie to me, being very disingenuous, especially in the beginning, about their technical abilities and the reason why they're actually in it, wanting to say they're working with me and my collaborators. And that's how it usually goes, right? This disingenuousness comes out, but it expresses itself in various ways. And usually it's about their technical commitment. Not everyone is technically savvy every way, and I don't expect that, but your commitment to want to put in that work because you're getting paid, you know what I'm saying? Right? And someone's giving you a PhD or whatever, you're getting money, something to do this work. It's super disrespectful when you're not even trying to meet your money 10% of the way. So that's once I see that, and I do it very quickly, first couple months, it's done. And if it lasts longer, I cut them off because I have to protect myself and my monetary assets and myself and my own sanity and stress. And stress is the top killer, folks. So especially, anyway, so protect yourself. I'm just imparting, don't feel any qualms about cutting people off when you're disrespected. Do it immediately, cut them off and keep it moving. So, and I do it gladly with efficiency. And the reason I say that is that you have to protect yourself in the long run, right? Because people talk. And people, you got to build your reputation. You can't be a bozo or someone pushing, a pushover. And people will try to do that, even when people don't know what they're doing, all right? And they want to learn from you. And so the last thing is when you send someone who's trying to finesse you, especially when they don't know what they're doing, right? You got to get rid of them.
Great, thanks for that insight. So we've heard already about the need to be upfront about our time and what we need from our mentors. If you could just reiterate, I think both Paige and Erica mentioned this, reiterate how you do that to best get your needs across.
I guess one thing that I do is I learned, at least with my PhD advisor, I learned the ways in which he is more responsive than others. So sometimes he's not always responsive via email, but he is super responsive if I go to him in person. And go to his office and say, hey, I need your help with this. I'm stuck. And so for me, one of the things was just to be able to understand this is like learning to understand when and how they're most responsive to you. So, you know, if they're, you know, on away on a trip or whatever for a conference or something, they're probably not going to be very responsive to you. But, you know, for me, like I said, it was just finding my advisor in his office and being like, hey, I really need this help from you. And that's been something that's been really valuable for me to learn, is just understanding what makes them responsive.
Yeah, I think probably the same for me. I think that setting expectations helps with that too. Like if you can communicate those things even before so that the other party doesn't have to figure it out. And so there are like some really formulaic ways to do that. I mean, in our department, we have a form that you and your advisor fill out that, you know, you fill out separately about your views on the mentorship experience, and then you compare answers. That's helpful for things, you know, like you've said before about little things even that you might not think about that one person cares a lot about. I think that's probably it for me. It's just, yeah, being as savvy as you can with these little things.
Great, thank you. Chris, did you have anything to add there?
No, I'm good. Yeah, good. Yeah, just keep it moving.
Great. Yeah, these are all great points. And yeah, if I really like that form that the departments have you fill out, because I think it can be really helpful. And I feel like more departments are moving towards that. So even if you don't have that directly from your department, if anybody listening is looking for something like that, I know that there are forms online that you can download and take to your mentor with that completed and establish those expectations early. Okay, so our next question, what would you say are positive qualities mentors look for in mentees? And anybody is welcome to start there.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I would say I look for the core is that you have social skills. Key for me. You know, they say common sense is not so common. I mean, seriously, you know, anyways, you have to be socially aware, number one. And then, you know, specifically for me, you got to be, if you're coming into a domain, you got to want to sacrifice the energy and time to meet those goals, to get that thing you want. And that's basically what I look for in a mentor. Someone is not going to cause me any issues, and who, even if they don't know the technical things yet, they are willing to put in that work, period.
Yeah, I can say I haven't tried this out in the real world yet. I've never had to hire really that many people. But I do think for me that excitement means a lot. And that I think Chris might have said this earlier, that being there for a reason that aligns with the reasons that I'm here really helps. So, you know, discriminating between people who are in it because they want, you know, maybe this is like a hypothetical example, like maybe some, you know, specials honors distinction versus someone who wants to do research because they want to know if they like it, or they're, you know, they think they might like it, or they're excited, or they want to, you know, answer a question. I think like those can really help. But I have found, and I mean, this is like my experience, is that, you know, I didn't know Python in undergrad, and I quickly learned it after undergrad, and now the bulk of what I do could be classified under computer science. So I feel like my initial idea right now moving forward is that I'm not too concerned with the full range of people's skills that they already have, because it seems to me that if you want to learn and you're motivated to learn for some right reason, whatever that may be, that you can do that. So that's how I'm standing now. I have hired very few people though, so I think it could be that when push comes to shove, I value skills more at the end of the day.
I guess one thing I would just add is, from the mentee perspective too, is understanding that you are a student in many ways, or still learning. And so you are not expected to know everything. And asking help when you need it and seeking feedback. Like that's what the mentor is for. And so reminding yourself that you are in a learning role and to be learning. And so I think that will also just make you a better mentee rather than struggling along, not telling anyone, and then, nearing the end of the project being like, well, I didn't figure out anything and it didn't come to you because, I thought I was supposed to know everything. Like that doesn't help us either as mentors. And so just reminding yourself as a mentee that like you are supposed to be learning, and part of having a mentor is so we can help you grow too.
Great, thank you. So we have a few more questions that got a lot of upvotes. So we'll move to, as you move into new positions where you have mentoring capacity, have you, and if so, how have you sought out new mentors for yourself in this new role? So we touched on this a little bit earlier, but really getting to the point of, as you move forward, does your mentor scene change who you've asked to be mentors?
Yeah, there's a lot of mentoring maps out there and stuff out there, and I don't have one physically filled out, but I kind of have like a mental one in my head of like, while I was doing my PhD, I sought out other friends that were also working on their PhDs, but outside of my research group, so we can kind of co-commiserate, but also celebrate exciting things. And now that I am in this role as a postdoc, it's kind of like, okay, now I want to find people that are also in postdoc positions that I can have some of that camaraderie with. So some of that shifts for sure, but I'm just trying to, like I said, I constantly keep this mentor map in the back of my head of just kind of like, where am I missing support? And, based off of that, then I can decide who I need to seek out. Like, am I missing support and trying to, understand how to be a postdoc? Then I need to find someone that's had a successful postdoc and reach out to them and say, what do you think made it successful? What did you do right? And so for me, it's just constantly trying to figure out what gaps are missing in terms of my mentoring network and trying to fill those gaps.
Thanks. And that's actually a really great plug for our co-working session next week, where we will be working on mentoring maps. If you'd like to join us, the link was shared earlier. But thanks, Paige, for that. Does anybody else have any other thoughts on that question?
Yes, one thought I have is that I've had a lot of success really directly asking people to be mentors, especially from the perspective of maybe if you're an undergrad or a post-undergrad or looking for master's to PhD transition, especially in that. But even when it's not obvious, it's not like an application, for example, like going to people and sitting down and saying like, I am looking for this kind of opportunity, can you offer this, has been really, really successful for me.
Yeah, I'll just say, I actually never asked anyone to be my mentor. All of my interactions, students have asked me to be their mentor. I've never asked a student, I want to mentor you. It's usually very organic, that's how it ended up for me. And as you traverse your career, it'll change. Like right now, I'm asking for money, pretty much, Anyway, no, I'm serious, but people who are collaborators, you can help me get money. That's the mentorship I'm looking for at this stage, so I can mentor other folks that are coming up the ranks. But it's pretty organic, just like most friendships that last long.
Great, thank you. And I think the final question that we'll touch on, just because you sort of touched on it there, Chris, is how do you recruit your mentees? You mentioned organically, but are there things you look for, or groups or organizations that you go to essentially as you're thinking about recruiting graduate students or people to work with?
I'll just be quick. Yeah, so when you all see, you start teaching, pretty much I have a database. I've kept the database. I advise people to do that. Maybe you want to keep a database of your contacts. And one thing you'll realize, Paige and Erica and everyone, when you're traversing and coming up the ranks, your core network from PhD is what was going to stick with you, right? And they're going to stay with you, and then, your nucleus and da-da-da, and then as you traverse, you get things outside and the outer shells there. But yeah, just maintain positive relationships with people, and remember that your core is really what's going to take you. Only a few people are going to really help you, and the rest is history. Miss Liz, I just wanted to plug something, if it's okay. I know a gentleman asked something about money. I know this is a very sensitive topic. I just wanted to plug. If you want to talk about money with anyone, you be frank and say, I want to talk about money. And then you contextualize it from the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and that's how I usually start off. But it's very important. Do not deviate from the financial discussion because it ties into everything.
Great, thank you. Yes, that's a great point. And be very upfront. Paige had also asked that question, answered that question, asking about money at the very beginning. Do you need to apply for your own grants type situation, or is there funding? So thank you so much. That's very helpful and also important because this is a stressful time of our lives and it can be a little low income time. So thank you for that. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left, and there's just one more, I think, super important question here. Do you have any recommended methods to receive feedback from previous mentees as they move on to improve your future mentoring? Do you have any tips for that, whether it could be anonymous, or have you done something like this to know how your mentoring is going?
I haven't done it as a mentor necessarily, but I did it as a mentee, but I think it's still very valuable. So I had done basically a like start, stop, continue in terms of like, what are 2 things you want to start doing or should start doing that you think, would help improve things. And so I think you could also do that like in this reverse role of a mentor of like, what me as a mentor, what can I start doing? Stop. What are things as a mentor I should stop doing? And, maybe explain why. And what are good things, like what are things that I'm continuing? Because then it allows, some real positive feedback, but also valuable critiquing of saying like, hey, this thing that you were doing is not helping me. And so I think I really like the start, stop, continue structure that I have seen, because I think it also just allows for some clarity too, rather than just like, can I do anything different? Like that's sometimes can be opening a can of worms, or also a very intimidating question to ask too, and intimidating for people to answer. So I really like the start, stop, continue.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I would say just ask. Sorry, Paige. I find the most direct way is the best way because I try to avoid people lying to me and being very finessey, disingenuous. Direct talk, and one thing to keep in mind, you're gonna know if you're a good mentor. I don't know, I'm not, attacking who asked that question. You should know if you're a very good mentor. That's what I would say. Yeah, and just ask.
Thanks. Erica, did you have anything to add there? I recognize you're a little bit earlier in that stage, but just in case.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I do think maybe in contrast to Chris, that sometimes it can be easy for mentors to think that something is helpful when it's not. And that maybe that's a lot dependent on the person, that one thing might be super helpful for somebody and very unhelpful for another personality type. And so yeah, I would just echo asking in whatever format you think is definitely worthwhile.
Great. Well, with respect to everybody's time, we're just about at the top of the hour. So thank you so much to our panelists for your thoughts today and your contributions. It's been really helpful for me, and I'm sure all of our panelists. We are having a co-working session next Thursday at this time from 1 to 2 Eastern to work through those mentor maps. Julia just shared the registration link in the chat for that meeting. It's a separate registration from this one, and that will allow us to map out where our mentors are, what's missing, and work on improving our networks. And so with that, thank you so much again for this great webinar. We really appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you all next week for the co-working session.
Thank you all.
Thanks, all.
Thank you.